the horrible remembrance of the things that happened to us. We don't want that. We don't want to think about it. We don't want those images coming up. We don't want those thoughts coming up. And so we deaden ourselves. We numb ourselves. We do it with drugs. We do it with alcohol. We do it with gambling. We do it with spending. We do it with sex. Any way to not feel.
Instead of actually going to, in terms of, as we spoke a lot, I believe that we covered a lot when it came to addiction. In order to, what can we substitute those addiction, whereas we deemed as things that will make us better, things that would actually make us, oh flip, I'm feeling better now. What can we substitute that with? Because I believe that there are quite a number of people that actually not deem therapy as something that will be very helpful. And one I have seen, and also on myself, I am a big advocate that people should go to therapy. And how can, if one actually is, I would say, it's not keen or doesn't believe in therapy or actually therapy is quite expensive. I'm lucky enough to be able to be in a place of actually getting free therapy. So how can one actually substitute those addiction with something good, with good things? What if those positive habits, what could be those habits be?
Well, first of all, most towns, cities have mental health centers where you can get counseling at reduced rate, according to what your income is. Catholic charities exist much the same way, and they purposely hire trauma counselors. There are groups of different faith, of different sorts that come together and work on sliding scale. Almost every town, city, even townships have AA, NA. They have anonymous programs, not just for the person that's struggling, but also for the family members. All right, these are programs that are self-help groups that will help the process. It may not heal it completely, but it will definitely help the process because they teach you a methodology of coming into responsible accountability for our actions and the things that we do, and making real changes in our lives to be able to be much more functional. So there are lots of things that we can do and that we can encourage people to do.
And to add on that, I believe that we run away from the word self-advocacy, and some people don't want to self-advocate for themselves because they believe that there are people already doing that. Definitely, they would assume in a way of a person in an international stand in a way of seeing a role model of them saying that no, that certain people already advocate for that thing, not realizing the fact that as much as they are advocating that thing, but at the same time, they actually, as much as they are advocating that thing, but are they tapping in your needs? Are they actually providing resources that will actually help you, not actually help a certain set of group? And that's what I actually keep on doing in a way of try by any means to actually advocate when it comes to mental health for everyone. But it definitely the dynamics in each country, in each city are quite different. For example, you spoke about AA, And something that I always saw in movies, I never saw personally. I never thought that there's this thing called AAs, Alcohol Anonymous. There are things that we are not taught. Instead of that, when I started knowing about substance abuse, that the people that have substance abuse, actually abuse alcohol, abuse drugs, have this different kind of, I would say, addiction can be helped through a certain platform or a certain service. There are government services that are out there, because the reason I'm bringing this up is the fact that I myself grew up in a community that actually loved alcohol. Like, they live and breathe alcohol in a way of they drink from Monday to Sunday and there's no rest. And I realized that actually this thing is happening. And with my first year here in university, I realized, oh flip, we were taught by substance abuse. I didn't even know that as I mentioned, that I didn't know that there's a such thing as substance abuse. So do you have, just before you close off, Dr. Keys, do you have anything to add?
Well, what I might ask, especially with you telling your story, when you were aware of substance abuse, did you stop it?
In all honesty, no. In all honesty, no.
Then what got you? What got you? I'm assuming that you have. What got you there?
Probably as I've said, that in a way of trauma, when as I was physically attacked, and in a way of being in a state of shock and almost dying. In a state of shock, I realized, oh flip, I need to actually, at first, I think after I did this after 3 years. Yeah, that's where I was able to actually say to myself, let me start this. Let me actually tell my story. That's where I started doing this. That's where I started doing this self-advocacy and in general mental health advocacy. Whereas I realized I've learned it as parts of myself that I needed healing. I needed to actually look at myself and realize that I need this, I need that, I need that. That's where then I feel like I can speak about alcohol. Whereas this self-awareness kicked in, I realized that I'm no longer drinking for fun of it. I'm just drinking to hide this thing that I have, this actually feeling that I'm always avoiding.
And there's the other piece, is being able to talk it through, to be able to tell your story and have somebody listen to you. Really listen to you. And the more you begin doing that, the easier it becomes.
Definitely. And another thing that I realize is the fact that as much as people are listening, they are listening to respond, not actually allow to actually listening just to share compassionate with you. And when I started actually telling my story to people, they didn't, in a way of, only gave me advices. Whereas at some point in my life, I didn't need advice. I needed someone to actually listen to me and realize that I'm going through this and I need some help. That's where I realized that let me start this advocacy. Let me actually start putting on mic and talk to myself. And definitely when I started doing this podcast, spoke with myself and eventually leveled up doing such conversation with you in terms of interviewing guests and professionals within the field.
I would be remiss if I didn't also say that many churches have counselors, many priests and pastors have studied counseling in order to help. There are places that you can go to have the process begun. You know, it's interesting. I truly believe that as we begin looking for help, we begin finding it. And we begin finding people that can take us to deeper places.
And I feel like, again, it's something that I feel like there's this misconception around the conversation that we're in terms of mental health, speaking about trauma, because we have this perception that I shouldn't tell anyone my story, and it goes back to that perception that I once had, whereas if I'm a psychologist, if they are white, they won't actually understand my story. They won't actually know where I come from, and only to realize that it's not like that. At some point, you'll be surprised how much they relate with you. So yeah, I feel like that's a conversation around that.
Telling your story is letting go of the secrecy, letting go of that place that you kept inside yourself, locked away for no one to ever see. And when you begin to share that, and you begin to open yourself to the process of healing.
Again, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your time. Really enjoyed this conversation. Really got to actually explore some of the things that I didn't know, and being able to actually learn a lot about towards you when it comes to trauma. Trauma, it's a conversation I try by any means to speak about, because again, as I mentioned, that I experienced it, and I won't say that I've healed from it, but at the same time, I actually am towards that.